So 722G hit with some major nerfs for Chen right after I finished recording this video. But in terms of the item builds, not much has changed. Basically, in terms of Chen relevant items, Medallion and Solar Crest are slightly weaker, and Breaks is also slightly weaker. But with those minor caveats, all of the advice given in the following video is still up to date. Of course, Chen is going to be quite a bit weaker now, but I think he's still playable, but only time will tell. So without further ado, I give you my skill and item build guide for Chen in patch 7.22. Welcome to the Church of Obelisk. In this guide, I'm going to talk about skill and item builds on Chen. I'm going to go through some of these items that are good on Chen, and I'm going to talk about why particular items, like this one, Aghanims, are not good on Chen.
As you say.
I'm going to talk about why Chen is typically played as position 5 right now. And then we're going to go over some of the item builds that were used at TI by KuroKy, yes, by Puppey, and by N0tail. And then I'm going to go over sort of items that I typically buy in a pub on Chen, to give you some good guidance on how to play Chen in your own games, as well as looking at what the pros do. So let's start with some early game items. First of all, let's talk about boots. Chen is a hero that doesn't need boots very early on. You often see pros actually getting boots around 15 minutes, sometimes even later. I've even seen some games at TI where Chens just skip boots entirely. I wouldn't recommend that, but I think you can definitely get away with getting your boots a bit later than you would with most heroes. As far as upgrading your boots goes, Boots of Travel is not really very useful on Chen, neither Phase or Treads, but these two upgrades definitely are quite useful. So Arcane Boots, of course, gives you extra mana. Thing is, you don't really need that much mana on Chen, and the kinds of items you just ordinarily buy already give you a decent amount of mana, so you don't really need those Arcane Boots, unless you get building Greaves. And then Tranquil Boots, since you don't really need any other upgrades, you might as well get Tranquils. It's not super useful in this extra movement speed, extra HP region, but it's okay to have. So this is like an optional upgrade you can get at some point if you have like a 550 gold to spare. But a lot of the time you'll just be walking around with just brown boots or even no boots at all in the early game. In terms of other early game items, you have of course the magic wand or just the stick. This is really efficient on Chen because you get extra value from this with Divine Favor. You get, with max Divine Favor, 20% extra healing from stick. Of course, that's not the reason that you get the wand. You get the reason you get the wand or a stick is just because it's an incredibly efficient item on its own on basically any hero that can spare the slots. And this just is like a cherry on top. Also very efficient item in this patch is Basilius. This gives a good amount of right click damage and just a nice aura to have in laning phase. So this is a good item to get early on, because you do actually right click quite a bit in the laning phase as Chen. So this extra 8 damage is quite useful, and also built into flats, which is one of the stronger items on Chen. Another very efficient item is Urn of Shadows. Urn is not really a typical Chen item, but it's a very good item to get just if no one else in your team is getting it, because it gives really nice stats, 1.5 mana regen. If you look at other mana regen items, that's almost as much as a Voice Stone gives you, and it is in fact exactly twice what a Sage's Mask gives you. So you're already kind of getting like a 650 gold worth of value. Now, you wouldn't typically buy a value Sage's Mask just as a casual item, so it's not really 650 value, but it's like, let's say 500 gold value from the mana regen alone. Let's say another 300 value from this 2 attributes and 2 armor. So that's already 800 gold of value you're getting just from the stats, and then you're only basically paying 75 gold for this active. So Urn of Shadows is a really efficient item. But almost always someone on your team should buy this item, and if no one else is buying it, go buy it on Chen. Another great item is Bracelets, just really efficient item right now. Gives you some magic resistance, some much needed strength if you're getting killed easily. This is basically an item if you're afraid of getting bursted, just get like a bracer or two. Another great item, of course, is Medallion. It's one of the strongest items in the game right now. It just gives you so much armor or armor reduction. And armor is really very strong stats in the game right now. Just take a look at this. Look at how little damage this creep is taking. This is amazing. Like, just look at this. It takes almost no damage. And all it has is this medallion and this aura. So medallion is a really good item. Just put it on some creep that's getting hit by a tower. If you're jungling, put it on putting the jungle creeps to make them to kill them faster. It's just a lot of value for this for its cost. Now let's move on to the more mid-range type of items. Here we have a big one that's Vlad's. Of course, built out of the Basilius, and it's just an efficient aura item. And in general, the itemization for Chen is you want to build as many aura items and utility items like a medallion to help out your team in fights as you can, and then you want to build as many survivability items as you must. So items like bracer, items like glimmer cape, like force staff. These items you don't really want to buy them, but sometimes you just have to buy them. Sometimes you just have to avoid getting killed. Another great item, of course, is a mech. Very efficient healing item, and you get some extra value out of this with Divine Favor. Now this is not like a huge amount of extra value. 20% is nice to have, but it doesn't mean that you always must buy mech. Yes. Also, what is important to notice that this also works for healing that is provided by allies. So if an ally buys mech and if you have Chen in the team, that's also more efficient. Just because you have Chen doesn't mean that you have to buy the mech. Often it's actually more efficient to have someone with more farm priority get the mech earlier, so you can push earlier with and still benefit from this Divine Favor as long as Chen is nearby. As I already mentioned, items like Glimmer Cape, like Force Staff, like Ghost Scepter are great if you need them. It's just the sort of standard support items for staying alive, and as a 5 position, you're often going to get focused, and if you find yourself dying too much, these are the items you want to buy. So these are particularly items you want if the game is not going too well. If the game is going well, you go all out on these aura items, get your flats, get your mech, and so on. Now here's another aura item that seems to fit like really well with what Chen wants to do. You know, Chen is this creep hero, you get these creeps, and then this gives you another creep. Great, right? It's even better than normal creeps. Also gives you an aura, and we already talked about how auras are great. But I'm strongly recommending against buying this item in Chen right now. Dominate is just a really weak item right now. This is all TI, even some of the heroes that were traditionally dominated by us, like Visage or Darkseer or Enigma, will often skip this item because it's just not very strong right now. Dominate is just not very strong right now. It was nerfed significantly last major patch. So you have extra recipe now, 300 gold, extra cost, as well as the nuisance of having to fly the courier for this. And you also can no longer convert catapults, making Dominate just a much weaker item than it used to be. And it just in general doesn't actually fit all that well with Chen. Because you already can get 4 creeps here, and these creeps are already quite good. These get bonus movement speed, these get bonus damage, which the dominant creeps are not going to get. I mean, dominant creeps are naturally fast, but don't get this bonus. And the thing is, if you can run around in a game and sort of constantly have this team of 4 decent creeps, your chances are you're already winning. And it doesn't really matter whether you buy a Dominator or something else. You're going to win anyway. Whereas in a game where you're struggling to keep alive, like 2 or 3 creeps, Dominator is not going to help you very much. Because Dominator doesn't conjure up new creeps out of thin air, it just allows you to take 1 extra creep. And that's just not very useful if you can't even find 4 decent creeps for your regular Holy Persuasion. The Dominator is not a good item on Chen. Another item that's really not good on Chen right now is Aghanim Scepter. So what does Aghanims do? It allows you to take over an ancient creep. One ancient creep per level you have in Hand of God. And that's nice and all, but it's just not nearly as strong as it used to be. There's only one ancient camp per side right now, so there's fewer good ancient creeps you can take.
So I go.
Another very important change is the change of send back. You used to be able to send back all your creeps to your own hero from anywhere on the map just by casting it on your own hero. And you can still do that, but if your creeps take hero damage, this stuff is cancelled. So now it doesn't get sent back. So what you could do is you could take over one of these big dragon creeps that has a fireball spell that can just kill a creep wave on its own, and you could just use this creep for split pushing. And you would hide these creeps somewhere on the map, you'd walk in fog and just pop out, kill a wave, and then go back into fog. And so if it gets found, your enemy only has 3 seconds to actually kill that creep before it gets sent back, and that's not very easy to do.
So I go.
Because nowadays they only have to do 1 point of hero damage within 6 seconds. That's very easy to do. So this is useless at rescuing creeps now. So this sort of split pushing with dragons is just a lot weaker than it used to be. So what you used to be able to do is to just get the Aghanims, and then would just really speed up your farm. You could just farm all these waves with these dragons and get all these amazing items. You can get Greaves, and you get Scythe, and you get all the items, maybe even Assault Cuirass. You're really rich. But that just doesn't work anymore. At least not nearly as well. So now Aghanims, you have this 4,200 gold item with really terrible build-up. Like these stats, they don't really matter on Chen. It's not very important to get these stats. So if you're position 5, you can't just save up to a 4,200 gold item that does nothing along the way. And another factor that was introduced recently is this these bonuses you get from Holy Persuasion. These of course also apply to ancient creeps, but they're proportionally more important for smaller creeps. Like if you take over this range creep, this more than doubles its actual attack. Whereas for an ancient, getting another 32 damage or 52 with the talent is not going to make much of a difference. Well, let's now move on to the more luxury kind of items. This is an obvious choice here, Guardian Greaves. You're often building mech in the mid game, or even someone's rushing mech, and then this is a natural upgrade once you have the gold to spare. Another great upgrade, of course, is Solar Crest. Already talked about that one. It's a really efficient item, 12 armor, and most importantly, this 80 attack speed. If you cast an allied hero, you can just buy this item, sit back, and just spam this on your carry. It's just providing a lot of value. But there's not an item to be rushed. It's fairly expensive for position 5, and this already does most of the job of a Solar Crest. And because it's such a strong item, because it's so expensive, it's usually better to actually buy this on a core. So you often have this setup where you have position 5 buying a medallion and position 3 buying a Solar Crest. That's very efficient because the items fully stack. So you're often better off just asking your offlaner to buy a Solar Crest while you just stick with the regular medallion. Pipe is also a great item on Chen. Oftentimes you want to get this earlier, so it's typically more of a position 3 item. But if your position 3 is not buying this, sometimes you have a position 3 hero that doesn't really want to buy these kind of aura items, then you can definitely get one of these. And then you have Lotus Orb, another great luxury item on Chen. Just a good utility item. Other items, Scythe of course is a great item to get in the late game. Nothing really Chen specific about that, but if you can get it in the late game, it's great, obviously. And then there's this item. This is probably the worst item in the game right now overall. But if you're playing Chen, it might be okay to buy this. Like if you already have Greaves, you can buy this. it's not terrible. You have a lot of healing with Greaves and with your ultimate, and this provides some regen. So this is a luxury item you can definitely buy. And because you're position 5 and because you buy some of these more expensive items like Guiding Greaves, you often have slots to spare in the late game for this. So it is definitely an option. But definitely don't rush this. And then of course there's Spirit Vessel. If you already bought the urn, it's definitely a good upgrade. So if you're against a team that has a lot of healing, where Spirit Vessel is very important to get early on, don't buy this in Chen. Have one of your cores buy it. Have position 2 or position 3 buy this item. It's perfect for an item to get on a core if you really need it, if you need it early. Because if you buy this on Chen, you're not going to have it early. But unless you're in a game where no one really wants to rush a Spirit Vessel, but it's still like a decent item to get. Even if they don't have a ton of healing, this is still useful. It's still useful for this percentage-based damage it does. This is a good luxury kind of item later on in the game. Just put this on a tanky hero at the start of the fight, and it's going to do a lot of damage for a very moderate cost. So let's first talk about KuroKy's Chen. So let's look at KuroKy's skill build first. So as almost all Chens do, you get a first point in Divine Favor. It's just really strong in laning phase for the first minute where you can't get any creep anyway. Having this extra regen is quite nice. And then of course you get 2 points in your Holy Persuasion. So these first 3 levels, you're almost always going to see exactly this for the first 3 levels. But after that it starts to diverge. So for level 4 you can either take a point here in Penitence, or you can take a second point here in Divine Favor. So what leveling up Divine Favor does is it gives you a little bit of extra regen, as well as increasing the amplifier for regen and for healing. But most importantly is it decreases the cooldown for your recall. And the thing is that in pop games, using this ability properly is quite difficult. Most people don't really understand what this ability does, even if they understand it on an intellectual level, they don't really have a feel for what it can do. And often you have games where people, even if you talk on the microphone, you type in game, telling them, I'm going to recall you, and you do, and they're still surprised that suddenly they're somewhere else on the map. And sometimes you have games where, for example, I had one game where someone just kept telling me to recall him, but he was actually still just staying in lane and trading with the enemy and getting damage and so on. And of course it's useless to actually recall someone like that, because he's just going to take hero damage, and then recall is going to go poof, and you just wasted this long cooldown. So this ability is quite difficult to actually productively use in pops, if you're solo queuing especially. But in pro games it's very different. In pro games it's a very strong ability, so Kuro puts heavy emphasis on this, even to the point of getting level 3 and 4 on this before the 4th level in Holy Persuasion. Kuro doesn't always do this. Sometimes he gets Persuasion at level 7, as most Chens do, but in some of these games he actually goes for this build, and this just heavily emphasizes this Divine Favor and this recalling, and de-emphasizes creeps. And this works for KuroKy apparently, but don't try this at home. In your pubs, always get this one at level 7. And then he gets the talents at 10 and 15, as a normal person would do. And then at last he maxes out Penitence, and of course gets the ultimate whenever he can. In terms of talents, he goes for XP gain, he goes for Divine Favor cooldown. In your pubs, typically this is stronger, but as I said, Divine Favor is really strong in pro games. And then he goes for the gold per minute. So you always need to go for this one. I think I've seen one game at TI where I think AU got this cast range talent, but other than that, it's just the XP gain talent. There's not that many items where you really care about cast range and your own abilities. Cast range is not that important. It's only important for penitence. So it's just not a very good talent anymore. This one is almost always better. And here it's really a question of, if you're in a pub, always take this basically. And in pro games, they usually take this one, but I've also seen some players take this one. Particularly AU likes to take this persuasion. And this one is very much favored to the gold talent. I don't think I've seen any game at this TI where they went for this persuasion minimum health talent. So pros are very heavily favoring this one. And then for this one, there's no data for what Kuro goes for here. Probably would go for the Hand of God heal, with my guess, but we don't know. He never actually reached 25 on Chen at this TI. Then you look at the starting item build. This is a Kuro special. I've never seen anyone else do this. This spends all your starting gold, meaning support items have to be bought by other players. So this also means that he's not sharing out any tangos to anyone else. You often see then GH sharing tangos with Mir. You even see Miracle sometimes sharing tangos with someone else. And that's something you can do if you're in a pro game and you have this strat that's focused around getting this early mech, but in your pubs, don't try this. Then he gets some efficient early game items. He gets the stick, he gets some wards, he gets a smoke. This is normal position 5 stuff. And then proceeds to try to get this mech. He has this buckler now, but then he realizes I do need boots after all. He gets the boots, and this sort of depends on how the game is going. If the game is going fairly well, he gets good farm. He just goes for the mech right away. But in this game, Kuro's farm tapered off a bit, and he got these boots before then finishing up the mech. After that, the situation when he gets, often he goes for the Glimmer Cape, as he does in this game. And as I talked about earlier, if you find yourself dying, go for the survivability items. But if you're not really dying very much, instead go for something like a Vlad's or a Medallion, or just finish off the Greaves. So much for Kuro's Chen. Now we're going to see Puppey, who plays a more sacrificial Chen, not as greedy as Kuro does. So his skill build is more traditional. He maxes out Persuasion first, and then he gets Divine Favor, and then Penitence right at the end, always taking the talents when he can. This is probably like the most common Chen build we've seen at TI. But Puppey doesn't always go for this build. Sometimes he also gets a point in this earlier, as does Kuro, by the way. There's also like 1 or 2 games where Kuro goes for an early point in Penitence. But yeah, this pros really value Divine Favor very highly. In terms of talent, it's the same as what Kuro does, except for Puppey, we don't have any data on games with 20 plus. Item build, this is more so traditional supporty stuff. He gets those region items, he gets wards, shares out tangos, and so on, all that good supporting stuff. Very ungreedy. And then he's also going to go for a similar build as Kuro does. He's going to rush this mech, getting the headdress first here, and then finishing up the mech. Was with this value stick thrown in, that it gets a stick here before the headdress. Then after he has this complete mech, he goes for a medallion, very valuable item. And then he goes for the patented Puppey buckler as well as this wand. This is not necessarily his like standard item build. He was in a really bad spot in this game, and they were sort of up against the ropes, and Secret wanted to hit a certain timing, and they didn't quite get it, so he bought these cheap, efficient items, just trying to squeeze out some sort of timing where you can do some sort of push, but it didn't work out, and they lost that particular game. But I just chose this game for illustration purposes because it's the longest Chen game that Puppey played, and you can see some more items. Now let's move on to who is, in my opinion, the strongest Chen player right now. That's N0tail. the two-time TI winner and most successful esports player of all time, at least in terms of prize money. So how does N0tail's skill build look like? Well, pretty much exactly like Puppey's, except in some of his games, not in all of his, but some of his games, he actually delays this talent. So this XP talent is of course very strong, but sometimes you're just in a position where you like really want to be strong right now. And extra XP gain is not gonna make you stronger right now. So if you're just hitting like a timing with your T, maybe you're just pushing high ground, or you just want to do a row, something like that. An extra point here in this one can help a lot, whereas extra XP gain, like who cares? If it's a matter of hitting a timing right now or not hitting the timing, then you want to be strong right now. So sometimes he goes and delays this level 10 talent. Other than that, very standard build. In terms of his talents, also very standard for pro play. In terms of items, similar to what Puppey got, a lot of region here. And then he goes for Basilius. Basilius is a very efficient early game item in lane. Some nice mana regen, some nice armor, and the right click damage also quite useful, as well as the stick. Pretty standard stuff here. And then he just goes ahead and rushes this Vlad's. Vlad's, of course, a very strong item in Chen. We talked about that earlier. And after that, he goes for boots. It's a good time to get boots. And after boost, he goes for a mech. Pretty straightforward stuff. I think I like this build the most of the ones we've seen here. And I mean, just look at him. How can you resist that face? Clearly, that's the face of the best Dota player of all time. So moving on from the best Dota player of all time to someone who is definitely not the best Dota player of all time. And that's me. And my own Chen build that I use in pubs. You're gonna see this looks very different from what we've seen earlier. So I also get the first 3 levels is the same, but then I get a point into Penitence, and Penitence actually is what I max out second. The reason is, as I said, that this ability is quite difficult to actually use profitably in pubs, whereas this one is very straightforward. You can just use it, and it works out quite nicely. One thing about this build, though, is that it's more mana hungry, so these kinds of like rush mech with no other items wouldn't really work with the skill build because you just run out of mana too quickly. So these are my talents. I also always go for the XP gain, always. I always go for this one. It's just not worth it to get this in pubs. And then here with the last 2 ones, I also go for this sort of standard stuff in the majority of my games, but I also sometimes go for this one as well as for this one. So what does this do? It's plus 1000 persuasion minimum health. So most creeps are below 1000 HP. Holy Persuasion puts them up to 1000. There's a handful of creeps that have 1100 HP, and these don't get any bump from the regular persuasion, but with this it goes up to 2000 HP. So for almost all of your creeps, it doubles the HP, making them a lot tankier and just allowing you to send them in the battle a lot more freely. There's a 1000 HP creep in the late game is just going to explode from any sort of AoE that's flying around. Whereas with 2000 HP, these are a lot more durable, and sometimes you can use them a lot more aggressively. But on the other hand, there's also games where there's just so much AoE damage flying around that this plus 1000 HP just doesn't make a difference. You just can't commit your creeps into a team fight anyway. And in those games, definitely go for this gold. Also, it's the most important consideration here is just how long do you think this game is going to last. If you think the game is going to be over in the next 5 minutes, this is not really very strong. It's not going to give you very much. Whereas this one is immediately useful. Although, of course, you have to keep in mind that it does not apply retroactively. So this plus 1000 HP only goes for new creeps you get. Your old one's still going to stay at 1000 HP. And then the final one is this Hand of God heal is a very strong talent. It's always useful. This one is a bit more situational, but can still be strong, especially if you're taking this talent here. So +5 persuasion units, meaning you can take up to 9 creeps, and you're never really going to have like 4 super high value creeps. So these extra 5 creeps you get are going to be more low value creeps. But especially if you take this talent and this talent, even the weakest creep is still going to pack quite a punch. They're going to get +52 damage, and they're going to have 2000 HP. So any creep you take is going to be quite useful. What it's mostly used is to get extra little centaurs and potatoes to get these stacking magic resistance auras. You have to keep in mind that these auras don't stack additively but multiplicatively. So if you have 5 extra little centaurs, it doesn't reduce your magic damage taken by 50%, but rather by 41%. And that's still pretty good though. For 1 talent point, getting 41% magic resistance is quite a lot. And that's on heroes. On creeps it's much better. So on creeps it's 20% reduction per instance. So if you have 5 of these, it's going to reduce magic damage by 67%. So more than 2/3. So that's very strong. Obviously it means that if you have this talent, it means you need more than 6,000 magic damage to actually kill one of these creeps. But the catch with this talent is that it's completely useless if you have fewer than 5 creeps, because you can only take 4 creeps anyway, and if you don't really manage to keep more than 4 creeps alive, this doesn't actually do anything, whereas this is always useful. So in the majority of games, go for this, but definitely consider taking this one. I like to play a very sacrificial kind of Chen. I like to buy all the support items. I buy 2 sets of tangos, share 2 to my mid. I buy 2 orbs and 2 sentries. With the remaining gold, I buy a branch and a fairy fire. Then I get a stick in lane and boots and upgrade to wand. Now, I don't always go for this very early boots, but sometimes you just have to. Sometimes you're playing against a hero like an Ursa, for example. Getting away from Ursa is very important, so you need this early boots. In other games, I go for my medallion first. And medallion is a really efficient item. We talked about that already. And also gives some nice mana regen. I'm also often buying clarities just to keep up with the mana regen, because as you said, this is a more mana intensive build. Then I often go for a mech, or sometimes also for a Vlad instead. Both of these are very viable. And after that I typically get the other one. It's like, this is sort of my typical mid-game setup. So these are just some really efficient items to help out your team. Not a lot of survivability for yourself. And this gives a decent amount of armor. You get 7 armor from this, like 5 armor from this, and there's 4 armor from this, plus a bit of stats. You have a lot of armor, but not a lot of protection against magic damage. And what's next here? Well, next is either survivability item, like if I'm having problems with magic damage, I get a glimmer cape here. So if I'm not worried about survivability, I'm either upgrading this into a crest or this into greaves. Depending on if there's a crest on my team already, then I'm not going to bother upgrading this and just go for the greaves. Otherwise, I'm probably just going to go for this solar crest right away and then get the greaves afterwards. So this has been my guide on Chen item builds and skill builds. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and down in the comment section, please tell me what is your favorite item build on Chen, and if you have any questions or there's any items that I didn't cover that you're curious about, please leave a comment down below. And in the meantime, may Obelisk protect you, and goodbye.